My name is Silas. I've spent the last decade behind the wheel of a car hauler, massive 10-car hanger truck. It's a specialized job, moving high-value vehicles across borders. 8 years ago, I had an experience that didn't just rattle me. It fundamentally changed how I look at the dark. It was mid-December, the kind of winter that feels like it wants to swallow the world whole. We were tasked with moving 10 vehicles from Long Island, New York, up to Toronto. Among the load was a high-end luxury sedan that had been totaled in a violent high-speed collision. It was a jagged mess of steel and shattered glass, loaded last onto the top rear of the rack because it couldn't be driven. The car looked like a coffin made of chrome, and every time the wind caught the tattered plastic covering its broken windows, it sounded like a dying man gasping for air. We pulled out of the depot at midnight. My partner was Marcus, a man who had more miles in reverse than I had going forward. He was a veteran, a man of few words and iron nerves. The plan was simple: stay on the I-95, push through the night, and hit the border by sunrise. But the universe had other plans. 2 hours into the drive, the CB radio crackled to life with a frantic warning. A massive pileup involving 2 fuel tankers had shut down the main highway. The state police were diverting everyone. Marcus grabbed the map. He pointed to a thin, jagged line that cut through the Adirondack Mountains, an old, secondary logging road that eventually looped back toward the Canadian border. "It's an extra 6 hours of off-roading, Silas," Marcus said, leaning back and resting his boots on the dashboard. "But it beats sitting in a 12-mile backup with millions of dollars worth of cargo." I turned the wheel. We left the salt-stained pavement of the highway and entered the black throat of the forest. The trees here were different, ancient, twisted oaks and skeletal pines that seemed to lean over the road, their frozen branches clawing at the top of the truck. As we climbed higher into the mountains, the temperature gauge on the dash plummeted. The heater was blasting, but I could feel the cold seeping through the floorboards, a biting chill that felt like it was coming from the earth itself rather than the air. Around 3 a.m., I pulled into a tiny, dilapidated gas station in a town that didn't appear on our GPS. The sign was swinging in the wind, a rusted metal scream that echoed through the empty street. I needed cigarettes. I left Marcus sleeping in the cab and went inside. The air in that shop felt wrong. It smelled like wet wool, copper, and something sweet like rotting fruit. The clerk didn't look at me. He just stared at the wall behind me, his eyes wide and unblinking. I bought a pack of Marlboros and climbed back into the cab, my skin crawling. In my exhaustion, I took a left at the fork, leaving the station. I thought I was following the curve of the mountain. I wasn't. Within 30 minutes, the road turned from asphalt to jagged, grey gravel. The trees disappeared, replaced by towering, granite rock faces that looked like rows of silent tombstones. I realized then that I was lost in a dead zone. No cell service, no GPS, no radio chatter, just the 40-mile-per-hour crawl of the truck and the red glow of the taillights reflecting off the rocks behind us. I was gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles were white. The silence of the mountains was heavy, a physical weight pressing against the windshield. Suddenly, in the wash of my high beams, I saw a flash of white. A figure tall, gaunt, wearing what looked like a tattered, blood-stained hospital gown, bolted across the road from left to right. I slammed on the brakes, the airlines screaming. Marcus jolted awake, shouting, asking what the hell was happening. I told him I thought I hit someone. We checked the side mirrors. Nothing but the red glow of the car carrier's lights and the swirling snow. Marcus scoured the darkness with a heavy-duty spotlight, but the beam seemed to die just a few feet from the truck, as if the darkness was eating the light. He told me there was nobody out there in 20-degree weather and that I was seeing phantoms of the road. But the dread had already taken root in my chest. I told him we were lost. He grew furious, checking the fuel levels and the manifest. We were hours off course, deep in a valley that didn't seem to belong to the map. We decided to stop and scout for a landmark. Marcus spotted a faint, flickering orange glow about half a mile off the road, nestled in a deep ravine. He thought it was a ranger station or a local who could point us back to the highway. He told me to stay with the truck while he went to check, grabbing a heavy mag light and a tire iron. I watched Marcus disappear into the shadows, his flashlight beam getting swallowed by the fog. I was alone. The silence returned, but this time it was different. It felt expectant. I did what every terrified trucker does. I pulled the thick privacy curtains shut across the windshield and the side windows, sealing myself in a fabric cocoon. I locked the doors and turned off every light in the cab until I was sitting in a black box. The silence lasted for 10 minutes. Then it broke. Beep, beep, beep. The security alarm on one of the SUVs on the top trailer began to wail. My heart hammered against my ribs. Then another started, and another. Within seconds, all 10 cars were flashing their lights and screaming their alarms into the mountain air. A chaotic symphony of electronic panic. I pulled a corner of the curtain back, just a sliver, and looked at the side mirror. I couldn't see a person, but I saw the truck moving. The entire 10-ton car hauler was swaying side to side, as if a dozen invisible hands were trying to tip it over. The suspension was groaning, the metal chains holding the cars down snapping under the tension. Then came the footsteps. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Someone or something was walking on the roof of the cab. I could hear the metal groaning and denting under a heavy, deliberate weight. Then a scratching sound began. Long, slow nails dragging across the glass of my driver's side window, just inches from my ear. It sounded like a diamond cutting through ice. A voice began to leak through the door seal. It wasn't one voice. It was a cacophony of whispers. A man, a woman, and the high-pitched, distorted giggling of children. They weren't speaking English. It sounded like a language made of wet clicks and rhythmic hisses. "Is he in there?" the woman's voice seemed to ask, the sound vibrating through the metal of the door. "He smells like fear," the man whispered back, his breath sounding like dry leaves skittering on pavement. The truck shook with a violent, bone-jarring force, nearly knocking me out of the seat. I felt a warm sensation and realized I had lost control of my bladder. I was a grown man, a professional driver, and I was weeping in the dark, clutching a tire iron and praying for the sun to rise. Suddenly, a loud, piercing shriek echoed from the ravine, the same woman's voice. But now it was a command, a guttural roar that shook the glass. Back now. The weight left the roof. The scratching stopped. The car alarms died out all at once, leaving a silence so profound it felt like I had gone deaf. I sat there in the dark for an eternity, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Marcus pounded on the door 10 minutes later. I opened it, my face ashen, my eyes bulging. He climbed in, looking equally haunted. His jacket was torn, and his boots were covered in a thick, black sludge. He told me we were leaving immediately, no questions asked. He said he found the fire burning in the middle of a rotted-out cabin with no one there, but the table was set for 3 people with steaming bowls of liquid. On the plates, he said, it wasn't food. It was piles of fresh human hair, still attached to bits of scalp. We turned that truck around in a desperate 20-point turn, the tires spinning on the gravel. I drove like demons were chasing us, pushing the engine until it screamed. We didn't stop, we didn't look back, and we didn't speak until we hit a brightly lit 24-hour diner back on the main road 2 hours later. As the sun began to rise, casting a pale, cold light over the world, Marcus and I walked to the back of the truck to check the cars. We reached the top rack where the totaled accident car sat. Marcus stopped and dropped his coffee cup, the ceramic shattering on the pavement. The totaled car, which had been crushed and empty when we loaded it in New York, was now filled. The interior was packed to the ceiling with old sun-bleached bones, hundreds of them, rib cages and femurs wedged into the dashboard and the seats. And smeared in thick dark blood across the inside of the windshield were 3 handprints, a man's, a woman's, and a tiny small child's. But the worst part was the smell. It wasn't the smell of old bones. It was the smell of fresh, unfiltered cigarette smoke, wafting from the dashboard of the wrecked car, as if someone had just finished their final smoke before the end. We found out later that the family who died in that car had been chain smokers. We didn't even deliver the load. We left the truck at a way station with the keys in the ignition and walked away from the industry forever. Even now, whenever I smell a cigarette in a quiet room, I feel the truck start to sway. We left the truck at that way station and didn't look back. I didn't care about the paycheck, the company, or the millions of dollars in cargo. Some things are worth more than money, like your soul. I moved to a different state, took a quiet job in a warehouse, and tried to convince myself it was all a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and mountain air. Marcus never spoke to me again. The last I heard, he had moved to the coast and refused to drive anything larger than a lawnmower. But the silence didn't last. A year ago, on the anniversary of that night, I received a plain manila envelope in the mail. There was no return address. Inside was a single, grainy photograph taken by a highway speed camera near the Ontario border. It was a photo of our old truck, taken an hour after we had abandoned it. The truck was moving at 70 miles per hour, even though the driver's seat was empty. But in the back, inside the twisted, totaled wreck on the top rack, you could clearly see 3 figures through the cracked glass: a man, a woman, and a small child. They weren't looking at the road, they were looking directly into the camera. And in the man's hand was a glowing ember, the light of a single cigarette, burning in the dark. I haven't slept with the lights off since, because now, every time I close my eyes, I don't hear the wind. I hear the sound of long, slow nails scratching against my bedroom window, and the smell of unfiltered smoke begins to fill the room.